Special animals and birds of India and Kerala. India is home to a diverse range of animal and bird species due to its varied topography and climatic conditions. Kerala, a state in southern India, is also known for its rich biodiversity and endemic species. Here are some of the special animals and birds found in India and Kerala. Bengal tiger. The Bengal tiger is the national animal of India and is found mainly in the forests of central and eastern India. It is an endangered species and efforts are being made to conserve their population. Indian elephant. The Indian elephant is another important animal in India and is found in the forests of the Himalayas, northeast India, and the western Ghats. Indian rhinoceros. The Indian rhinoceros is found in the grasslands of Assam and West Bengal. It is an endangered species and is protected under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act. Indian peafowl. The Indian peafowl, also known as the peacock, is the national bird of India. It is found in various parts of the country and is known for its colorful plumage. Sarus crane. The Sarus crane is the tallest flying bird in the world and is found in the wetlands of India, including in Kerala. It is the state bird of Uttar Pradesh. Nilgiri tahr. The Nilgiri tahr is an endemic species found in the western Ghats of India, including in Kerala. It is a rare mountain goat and is protected under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act. Lion-tailed macaque. The lion-tailed macaque is an endangered species found in the western Ghats of India, including in Kerala. It is known for its distinctive lion-like mane and is protected under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act. Malabar giant squirrel. The Malabar giant squirrel is found in the western Ghats of India, including in Kerala. It is known for its bright and colorful fur and is a protected species. Indian giant flying squirrel. The Indian giant flying squirrel is found in the forests of the Himalayas, northeast India, and the western Ghats. It is known for its ability to glide from tree to tree. Indian peafowl. The Indian peafowl, also known as the peacock, is the national bird of India. It is found in various parts of the country and is known for its colorful plumage. These are just a few examples of the many special animals and birds found in India and Kerala, highlighting the country's rich biodiversity and the need for conservation efforts to protect these species. Proto-cooperation in detail with multiple examples. Proto-cooperation, also known as facilitation, refers to the relationship between two or more species in which one species benefits from the presence of another species without harming it. This type of interaction is considered a precursor to mutualism, a type of interaction where both species benefit from each other. Here are some examples of proto-cooperation in nature. Shelter sharing. Certain species of animals may seek shelter in the burrows or nests of other animals. For instance, burrowing owls may share their burrows with prairie dogs, which helps to protect them from predators. Similarly, the anemone hermit crab may carry a sea anemone on its back, which provides it with protection from predators. Habitat modification. Some species may modify their environment in a way that benefits other species. For example, beavers construct dams that create ponds, which provide habitat for many other species of animals, including fish, birds, and amphibians. Food sources. Certain species may provide a food source for other species. For example, acacia trees produce nectar that attracts ants, which in turn protect the tree from herbivores. The ants also benefit from the nectar as a food source. Algal and fungal associations. Certain algae and fungi form associations with other organisms, providing them with nutrients and other benefits. For instance, lichens are a mutualistic association between fungi and algae, where the algae provides food for the fungus and the fungus provides protection and a structure for the algae. Proto-cooperation plays an important role in shaping ecosystems and the evolution of species. It can provide benefits to both species involved, allowing them to better survive and reproduce in their environment. As a result, proto-cooperation may lead to the development of more complex forms of cooperation, such as mutualism, which can have significant impacts on ecosystem functioning and biodiversity. ChatGPT March 23rd version. Project Tiger. Project Tiger is a wildlife conservation program launched in India in 1973 with the aim of protecting the endangered Bengal tiger species. The project was initiated by the Government of India in response to the alarming decline in tiger populations due to habitat destruction, poaching, and other human activities. The project has been highly successful in achieving its objectives, with the number of tigers in India increasing from a mere 1,411 in 2006 to over 2,967 as of 2018, according to the latest Tiger Census report. Project Tiger has involved the relocation of villages, creation of protected areas and wildlife corridors, and the implementation of strict anti-poaching measures. In addition to the conservation of the tiger species, Project Tiger has also helped to preserve the ecosystems and biodiversity of the areas where the tigers live. The project has become a model for conservation efforts around the world and has inspired the launch of similar programs in other countries. Overall, Project Tiger has been a remarkable success story in the field of wildlife conservation, and it continues to be an important initiative for the protection of tigers and their habitats in India. Project Tiger is a wildlife conservation program launched by the Government of India in April 1973, with the aim of protecting the endangered Bengal tiger species. The program was initiated in response to the alarming decline in tiger populations due to habitat destruction, poaching, and other human activities. The program has been implemented by the National Tiger Conservation Authority (NTCA), which is responsible for managing and implementing various tiger conservation projects in India. The program has several objectives, which include to ensure a viable population of Bengal tigers in their natural habitats, to protect the tiger population from extinction, and to increase their numbers, to preserve the natural habitats of tigers and their prey species, to promote ecotourism and provide livelihood opportunities for local communities, to create a sense of pride among local communities for the protection of tigers and their habitats. The program has been highly successful in achieving its objectives, with the number of tigers in India increasing from a mere 1,411 in 2006 to over 2,967 as of 2018, according to the latest Tiger Census report. The key strategies and initiatives of Project Tiger include identification of tiger reserves. The program identified and designated several tiger reserves across the country, which are protected areas meant specifically for the conservation of tigers and their habitats. As of 2021, there are 50 tiger reserves in India. Habitat management. The program aims to improve the quality of tiger habitats and promote the restoration of degraded ecosystems. This involves the management of forests, grasslands, and wetlands, which are the natural habitats of tigers and their prey species. Anti-poaching measures. The program has implemented strict anti-poaching measures, such as the deployment of forest guards and the use of technology such as camera traps and drones to monitor and prevent poaching activities. Relocation of villages. The program has relocated several villages from tiger reserves to reduce human-tiger conflicts, which is one of the major threats to tiger populations. Conservation awareness and ecotourism. The program aims to promote conservation awareness among local communities and tourists. It also promotes ecotourism, which provides livelihood opportunities to local communities and helps to generate revenue for the conservation of tiger habitats. The success of Project Tiger has been recognized globally, and it has become a model for conservation efforts around the world. The success of Project Tiger has been recognized globally, and it has become a model for conservation efforts around the world. The program has also inspired the launch of similar initiatives in other countries. Overall, Project Tiger has been a remarkable success story in the field of wildlife conservation, and it continues to be an important initiative for the protection of tigers and their habitats in India. Principles of conservation. Conservation refers to the responsible use and management of natural resources to ensure their sustainable use and to preserve them for future generations. Here are some of the principles of conservation. Sustainable use. Natural resources should be used in a way that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Biodiversity. The diversity of living organisms is crucial to maintaining healthy ecosystems and should be preserved through conservation efforts. Preservation. Some areas and resources are so valuable that they should be preserved in their natural state to maintain their ecological, cultural, and historical significance. Ecosystem approach. Conservation efforts should consider the complex relationships between living organisms and their environment, and strive to protect entire ecosystems rather than just individual species. Prevention. It is easier and less expensive to prevent damage to natural resources than to restore them after they have been depleted or degraded. Public participation. Successful conservation efforts require the active involvement of local communities, stakeholders, and the general public. Adaptive management. Conservation efforts should be flexible and responsive to changing conditions, and incorporate new knowledge and technologies as they become available. Sustainable development. Economic development should be balanced with environmental protection to ensure that natural resources are used in a way that benefits both people and the planet. These principles guide the actions of conservationists and policymakers to protect and preserve natural resources for future generations. Carbon credit. Carbon credits are a market-based mechanism for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They represent a way for businesses, governments, and individuals to offset their carbon emissions by investing in projects that reduce emissions elsewhere. A carbon credit represents the right to emit 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide, or an equivalent amount of another greenhouse gas, such as methane or nitrous oxide, and is typically bought and sold on carbon markets. The process works as follows. Entities that reduce their carbon emissions below a certain level can earn carbon credits, which they can then sell to others who need to offset their emissions. This creates an incentive for companies to reduce their carbon emissions and invest in renewable energy and other low-carbon technologies. The concept of carbon credits is based on the idea that the atmosphere is a shared resource, and that emissions reductions in one location can offset emissions elsewhere. The goal is to create a financial incentive for businesses and individuals to reduce their carbon footprint and invest in cleaner technologies. Carbon credits have been criticized by some for allowing companies to continue emitting greenhouse gases while buying offsets, rather than making substantive changes to their operations. Others argue that carbon credits can be a useful tool for encouraging emissions reductions and promoting sustainable development. Advantages and disadvantages of carbon credit. Carbon credits are tradable certificates that represent a reduction or removal of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of carbon credits. Advantages. Encourage emission reduction. Carbon credits provide a financial incentive for companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. This can lead to the development of new technologies and practices that help reduce emissions. Promote sustainable development. Carbon credits can promote sustainable development by supporting projects that improve energy efficiency, promote renewable energy, and protect forests and other natural resources. Generate revenue. Companies that reduce their emissions can sell their carbon credits on the carbon market, generating revenue that can be used to finance further emission reduction efforts. Global cooperation. Carbon credits provide a mechanism for global cooperation on climate change mitigation, by allowing developed countries to invest in emission reduction projects in developing countries. Disadvantages. Complex market. The carbon market can be complex and difficult to navigate, particularly for smaller companies or organizations. Market fluctuations. The value of carbon credits can fluctuate based on changes in supply and demand, which can make it difficult for companies to plan and budget for their emission reduction efforts. Additionality. The concept of additionality, which requires that emission reduction projects go beyond what would have happened anyway, can be difficult to prove, which can lead to uncertainty and a lack of trust in the carbon market. Limited impact. While carbon credits can promote emission reductions in specific projects or industries, they may not be sufficient to address the scale of emissions reductions needed to address climate change. Criticisms of offsetting. Some critics argue that carbon credits promote the idea that emissions can be offset through carbon reduction projects, rather than addressing the root causes of emissions through structural changes in the economy. Overall, carbon credits can provide benefits in terms of encouraging emission reductions and promoting sustainable development, but they also have limitations and potential drawbacks that need to be carefully considered. Carbon trading. Carbon trading is a market-based mechanism for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It allows companies and countries to buy and sell permits or allowances to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases within a set period. Under a carbon trading system, a regulatory authority sets a limit on the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are allowed, and then distributes emissions permits or allowances to companies or countries. Those that emit less than their allotted amount can sell their unused permits to those that need more, creating a market for carbon credits. The idea behind carbon trading is to create a financial incentive for companies to reduce their carbon emissions by making it more expensive to pollute. The cost of buying permits can provide an incentive for companies to invest in clean energy and other low-carbon technologies. Carbon has been implemented in a number of countries and regions, including the European Union, California, and China. However, there are criticisms that carbon trading can be subject to manipulation and fraud, and that it does not do enough to encourage emissions reductions or address the root causes of climate change. Despite these concerns, carbon trading remains a popular tool for addressing climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Advantages and disadvantages of carbon trading. Carbon trading is a market-based mechanism for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of carbon trading. Advantages. Encourage emission reductions. Carbon trading provides a financial incentive for companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Companies that can reduce emissions below their assigned level can sell their surplus allowances to companies that are unable to reduce their emissions below their assigned level. Cost-effective. Carbon trading can be a cost-effective way to achieve emission reductions, as companies that can reduce emissions at a lower cost can sell their surplus allowances to companies that face higher costs to reduce their emissions. Promote innovation. Carbon trading can promote innovation by providing financial incentives for companies to develop and implement new technologies and practices that help reduce emissions. Global cooperation. Carbon trading provides a mechanism for global cooperation on climate change mitigation, by allowing developed countries to invest in emission reduction projects in developing countries. Disadvantages. Complex market. The carbon market can be complex and difficult to navigate, particularly for smaller companies or organizations. Market fluctuations. The value of carbon allowances can fluctuate based on changes in supply and demand, which can make it difficult for companies to plan and budget for their emission reduction efforts. Additionality. The concept of additionality, which requires that emission reduction projects go beyond what would have happened anyway, can be difficult to prove, which can lead to uncertainty and a lack of trust in the carbon market. Limited impact. While carbon trading can promote emission reductions in specific projects or industries, it may not be sufficient to address the scale of emissions reductions needed to address climate change. Criticisms of offsetting. Some critics argue that carbon trading promotes the idea that emissions can be offset through carbon reduction projects, rather than addressing the root causes of emissions through structural changes in the economy. Overall, carbon trading can provide benefits in terms of encouraging emission reductions, promoting innovation, and global cooperation, but they also have limitations and potential drawbacks that need to be carefully considered. Blue carbon. Blue carbon refers to the carbon that is captured and stored by coastal and marine ecosystems, particularly mangroves, seagrasses, and tidal marshes. These ecosystems are able to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in their biomass and in the sediments beneath them. Coastal and marine ecosystems are some of the most productive ecosystems on Earth and are estimated to capture and store more carbon per unit area than terrestrial forests. However, these ecosystems are also under threat from human activities such as coastal development, pollution, and climate change. The conservation and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems have gained attention as a strategy for mitigating climate change. By protecting and restoring these ecosystems, we can not only conserve biodiversity and maintain the many ecosystem services they provide but also reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Blue carbon has the potential to become a valuable tool for carbon offsetting, as carbon credits could be generated from the protection and restoration of these ecosystems. However, there is still much to learn about blue carbon ecosystems and their potential for mitigating climate change, and further research and investment are needed to fully understand and realize their potential. Green building technology and its ecological importance. Green building technology, also known as sustainable building technology, refers to the use of environmentally friendly materials and design techniques to construct buildings that minimize their impact on the environment. The ecological importance of green building technology lies in its potential to reduce the environmental impact of buildings, which are responsible for a significant portion of global greenhouse gas emissions. By incorporating sustainable building practices, buildings can become more energy efficient, reduce waste, conserve water, and improve indoor air quality, among other benefits. Here are some examples of green building technologies and their ecological importance. Energy efficient design. Buildings that are designed to be energy efficient can significantly reduce energy consumption and associated greenhouse gas emissions. Renewable energy. Incorporating renewable energy sources, such as solar panels and wind turbines, into building design can reduce reliance on fossil fuels and decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Efficient water use. Water-efficient building design and plumbing fixtures can reduce water consumption and the associated energy required for water treatment and distribution. Use of sustainable materials. Building materials that are sustainably sourced and produced, such as recycled materials, can reduce environmental impact and promote the circular economy. Green roofs and walls. Vegetated roofs and walls can improve air quality, reduce stormwater runoff, and provide habitat for wildlife. By implementing these and other green building technologies, buildings can become more sustainable and have a positive impact on the environment. In addition to their ecological benefits, sustainable buildings can also provide economic benefits through reduced energy and water costs and increased property values. Procedure of green building technology. The procedure for implementing green building technology can vary depending on the specific project and goals, but generally involves the following steps. Planning. The first step is to define the goals and scope of the project, including the desired level of sustainability, budget, and timeline. This may involve conducting a feasibility study to assess the environmental impact of the project and identify potential green building technologies to be incorporated. Design. The design phase involves developing a detailed plan for the building, including site selection, building orientation, energy-efficient design, use of sustainable materials, and incorporation of green technologies such as renewable energy and water-saving features. Construction. During the construction phase, green building practices are implemented, such as using sustainable materials, minimizing waste, and ensuring energy-efficient systems are properly installed. Commissioning. The commissioning phase involves testing and verifying that the building systems are operating efficiently and as intended. This includes evaluating energy and water usage, indoor air quality, and overall performance. Operation and maintenance. Once the building is occupied, it is important to maintain its green features and systems to ensure ongoing efficiency and sustainability. This includes regular maintenance and monitoring of energy and water usage, as well as addressing any necessary repairs or upgrades. Certification. Finally, buildings may be certified by third-party organizations such as the U.S. Green Building Council's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design (LEED) program or the International Living Future Institute's Living Building Challenge. Certification provides recognition of a building's sustainability and can be a valuable marketing tool. Overall, the procedure for green building technology involves a comprehensive approach to building design and construction that prioritizes sustainability and environmental responsibility. By following this procedure, buildings can become more energy efficient, reduce waste, conserve water, and have a positive impact on the environment. Benefits of interlinking of major rivers of India. The idea of interlinking major rivers of India is a controversial one and has both potential benefits and drawbacks. Here are some of the potential benefits. Increased irrigation. One of the main arguments in favor of interlinking rivers is that it could provide a reliable source of water for irrigation, particularly in drought-prone regions. This could potentially increase agricultural productivity and help support rural livelihoods. Flood control. Interlinking rivers could also help to control flooding in certain areas by diverting excess water from one river basin to another that is experiencing a water deficit. Hydroelectric power generation. Interlinking rivers could also create new opportunities for hydroelectric power generation, which could help to meet growing energy demands in the country. Navigation. The creation of interconnected waterways could also facilitate transportation and trade between regions, potentially boosting economic growth and development. However, it is important to note that there are also potential drawbacks to interlinking rivers, including the displacement of communities, ecological impacts, and the potential for conflicts between states over water sharing. Additionally, there are concerns about the feasibility and cost-effectiveness of such a massive engineering project. Ultimately, the potential benefits and drawbacks of interlinking major rivers of India need to be carefully evaluated and weighed against each other, taking into account the complex social, economic, and environmental factors involved. Disadvantages of the idea of interlinking of major rivers of India. The idea of interlinking major rivers of India has been a subject of controversy, with many experts and stakeholders raising concerns about its potential drawbacks. Here are some of the disadvantages of interlinking major rivers of India. Displacement of communities. The construction of canals and dams required for interlinking rivers could lead to the displacement of communities living in the affected areas. This could have significant social and economic impacts on these communities. Ecological impacts. Interlinking rivers could have significant ecological impacts on the affected regions, including changes in water quality and quantity, disruption of natural habitats, and loss of biodiversity. Cost and feasibility. The cost and feasibility of interlinking major rivers is a major concern, with estimates suggesting that the project could cost billions of dollars and take many years to complete. There are also concerns about the technical and engineering challenges involved in the project. Water sharing disputes. Interlinking rivers could potentially lead to conflicts between states over water sharing, particularly in regions where water is already scarce. Social and cultural impacts. Interlinking rivers could have significant social and cultural impacts on the affected regions, including changes in traditional livelihoods and cultural practices. Overall, the potential disadvantages of interlinking major rivers of India need to be carefully evaluated and addressed before any large-scale implementation of the project can be considered. It is important to ensure that the project is socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable and that the concerns of all stakeholders are taken into account. Sethusamudram Ship Canal Project. The Sethusamudram Ship Canal Project is a proposed project to create a shipping route through the shallow waters between India and Sri Lanka. The project aims to reduce the distance and travel time for ships sailing between the east and west coasts of India, by bypassing the current route around the southern tip of India, which is longer and more treacherous. The proposed project involves dredging a canal through the Palk Strait, which separates India and Sri Lanka. The canal would be approximately 83 kilometers long, 300 meters wide, and 12 meters deep, and would connect the Bay of Bengal to the Gulf of Mannar and the Indian Ocean. The project has been controversial, with concerns raised about its potential environmental and social impacts. Opponents argue that dredging the canal could damage the fragile marine ecosystem in the Gulf of Mannar, which is home to several species of endangered marine life, including sea turtles and dugongs. There are also concerns that the project could have a significant impact on local fishing communities, whose livelihoods depend on the marine resources in the area. Proponents of the project argue that it could have significant economic benefits, by reducing shipping times and costs and boosting trade and commerce in the region. The project has been under consideration for several decades, with various studies and reports being conducted to assess its feasibility and potential impacts. As of now, the Sethusamudram Ship Canal project is still under consideration, and it remains to be seen whether it will ultimately be implemented, and if so, what measures will be taken to address the concerns of its opponents. Advantages of Sethusamudram Ship Canal project. The Sethusamudram Ship Canal project has been proposed with the aim of creating a shipping route between India and Sri Lanka that could offer several advantages. Here are some of the potential advantages of the project. Reduced travel time and costs. The creation of a shipping route through the Palk Strait could reduce travel time and costs for ships sailing between the east and west coasts of India, as it would bypass the longer and more treacherous route around the southern tip of India. Increased trade and commerce. The project could boost trade and commerce in the region by providing a more efficient and cost-effective shipping route, which could potentially increase economic growth and development. Job creation. The construction and operation of the canal could create employment opportunities for local communities, particularly in the areas of construction, transportation, and shipping. Strategic importance. The canal could have strategic importance for India by providing a more direct shipping route to the Indian Ocean, which could enhance India's maritime capabilities. Improved connectivity. The project could improve connectivity between India and Sri Lanka, which could have positive implications for bilateral relations and cooperation. However, it is important to note that there are also potential drawbacks to the project, including environmental impacts and social concerns, particularly for local fishing communities. Therefore, any decision to implement the project must take into account these concerns and ensure that measures are in place to address them. Disadvantages of Sethusamudram Ship Canal project. The proposed Sethusamudram Ship Canal project has been a subject of controversy, with concerns raised about its potential drawbacks and impacts. Here are some of the potential disadvantages of the project. Environmental impact. The project could have significant environmental impacts, including damage to the fragile marine ecosystem in the Gulf of Mannar, which is home to several species of endangered marine life, including sea turtles and dugongs. The dredging of the canal could also release sediments and pollutants into the sea, which could have adverse effects on marine life. Social impact. The project could have a significant social impact on local fishing communities, whose livelihoods depend on the marine resources in the area. The dredging and construction of the canal could disrupt fishing activities, and there are concerns that the project could lead to the displacement of fishing communities. Cost. The project is estimated to cost billions of dollars, and there are concerns about the economic viability of the project, as well as the potential for cost overruns. Technical challenges. The construction and maintenance of the canal could pose significant technical challenges, including the risk of siltation and erosion, which could require ongoing maintenance and dredging. Strategic implications. The project could have strategic implications, as it could potentially change the balance of power in the region by providing India with a more direct shipping route to the Indian Ocean, which could be viewed as a threat by other countries in the region. Overall, the potential disadvantages of the Sethusamudram Ship Canal project need to be carefully evaluated and addressed before any large-scale implementation of the project can be considered. It is important to ensure that the project is socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable and that the concerns of all stakeholders are taken into account. Biodiversity with special reference to India's status monitoring and documentation. Biodiversity refers to the variety of living organisms that inhabit a given ecosystem. India is one of the world's most biodiverse countries, with a rich array of flora and fauna, including many endemic species. However, the country's biodiversity is under threat due to habitat loss, pollution, climate change, and other human activities. To monitor and document the status of biodiversity in India, several initiatives have been undertaken, including National Biodiversity Act. In 2002, India passed the National Biodiversity Act, which seeks to conserve India's biodiversity by regulating access to biological resources and associated knowledge. National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority (NBA) was established in 2003 to implement the provisions of the National Biodiversity Act. The NBA is responsible for regulating access to biological resources and ensuring their sustainable use. Biodiversity hotspots. India has been identified as one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, with several regions of high biodiversity, such as the Western Ghats and the Eastern Himalayas. These areas are being monitored to identify and document the status of biodiversity and to develop conservation strategies. National Wildlife Action Plan. The National Wildlife Action Plan is a comprehensive strategy for conserving India's wildlife and their habitats. The plan includes measures for monitoring and documenting the status of biodiversity, as well as for protecting and restoring habitats. Indian Biodiversity Portal. The Indian Biodiversity Portal is an online platform that provides information on India's biodiversity. The portal includes data on species, ecosystems, and habitats, as well as tools for mapping and visualizing biodiversity data. Overall, monitoring and documenting the status of biodiversity in India is essential for developing effective conservation strategies and ensuring the long-term sustainability of the country's natural resources. Biodiversity of India. India is one of the world's most biodiverse countries, with a wide variety of flora and fauna. The country's biodiversity is due to its varied topography, climate, and geography, as well as its long history of human settlement and cultural diversity. Here are some of the key features of India's biodiversity. Species diversity. India is home to approximately 7–8% of the world's total species, including more than 91,000 animal species and 47,000 plant species. The country has the highest number of reptiles and amphibians in the world, as well as a large number of bird species. Endemic species. India has a high proportion of endemic species, which are species that are found only in a specific region. Approximately 33% of India's plant species and 12% of its vertebrate species are endemic. Approximately 33% of India's plant species and 12% of its vertebrate species are endemic. Biodiversity hotspots. India has several biodiversity hotspots, which are regions that have high levels of biodiversity and are threatened by human activities. These include the Western Ghats, the Eastern Himalayas, and the Indo-Burma region. Forests. India has a diverse range of forests, including tropical rainforests, deciduous forests, and alpine forests. These forests are home to many of India's iconic wildlife species, including tigers, elephants, and monkeys. Marine biodiversity. India has a long coastline and a rich marine ecosystem, with a variety of coral reefs, mangroves, and marine animals, including sea turtles and dolphins. Traditional knowledge. India has a rich tradition of traditional ecological knowledge, which has helped to preserve and sustain biodiversity over centuries. This knowledge includes practices such as agroforestry, sustainable fishing, and traditional medicine. Overall, India's biodiversity is a valuable natural resource that provides ecosystem services, such as pollination, water purification, and carbon sequestration. However, the country's biodiversity is under threat from habitat loss, climate change, and other human activities, highlighting the need for conservation efforts and sustainable development. Biodiversity documentation of India. Biodiversity documentation in India refers to the process of recording and preserving information about the country's rich biodiversity. Documentation of biodiversity is important for understanding the distribution and status of species, identifying threats to their survival, and developing strategies for their conservation. Here are some initiatives that are involved in documenting the biodiversity of India. The Botanical Survey of India (BSI) is an organization that is responsible for documenting the plant biodiversity of India. The BSI maintains a database of information about plant species, including their distribution, habitat, and medicinal uses. The Zoological Survey of India (ZSI) is an organization that is responsible for documenting the animal biodiversity of India. The ZSI maintains a database of information about animal species, including their distribution, habitat, and conservation status. The InBiodiversity Portal (IBP) is an online platform that provides information about India's biodiversity. The IBP contains data on species, ecosystems, and habitats, as well as tools for mapping and visualizing biodiversity data. The National Biodiversity Authority (NBA) is an organization that is responsible for regulating access to biological resources and ensuring their sustainable use. The NBA maintains a database of information about the use of biological resources in India, as well as the traditional knowledge associated with their use. The Wildlife Institute of India (WI) is an organization that is involved in the conservation and management of wildlife in India. The WI conducts research on the ecology and behavior of wildlife species, and provides training and technical assistance to other organizations involved in wildlife conservation. Overall, the documentation of biodiversity in India is an ongoing process that requires collaboration between multiple organizations and stakeholders. It is important for the conservation of India's rich biodiversity and for the sustainable use of its natural resources. Major drivers of biodiversity change in detail. Biodiversity change is driven by a complex interplay of natural and human factors. Here are some of the major drivers of biodiversity change in detail. Habitat loss and fragmentation. The loss and fragmentation of natural habitats are the most significant drivers of biodiversity change worldwide. This occurs due to human activities such as deforestation, agriculture, urbanization, and infrastructure development. Habitat loss and fragmentation reduce the size and quality of natural habitats, which can lead to the extinction of species, changes in ecological processes, and alterations in the composition of ecosystems. Climate change. Climate change is one of the most significant drivers of biodiversity change in recent decades. It affects species distribution, migration patterns, and breeding cycles, leading to changes in the abundance and diversity of species. Climate change also alters the timing of seasonal events, such as flowering and migration, which can have cascading effects on ecosystem processes. Invasive species. Invasive species are non-native species that are introduced into an ecosystem and can have negative impacts on native species and ecosystems. Invasive species can displace native species, alter food webs, and change ecosystem processes. Overexploitation. Overexploitation of natural resources, such as overfishing or hunting, can lead to the depletion of species populations and changes in ecosystem structure and function. This can also lead to changes in the social and economic systems that rely on these resources. Pollution. Pollution from human activities, such as agriculture, industry, and transportation, can have negative impacts on biodiversity. Pollutants can accumulate in ecosystems and can have toxic effects on species, leading to declines in population size and changes in the composition of ecosystems. Disease. Disease can have significant impacts on biodiversity by affecting population size and structure. Emerging diseases can also have a cascading effect on ecosystems, leading to changes in species interactions and ecosystem processes. Overall, the drivers of biodiversity change are complex and interrelated, and their impacts can vary across different regions and ecosystems. Addressing the drivers of biodiversity change requires a combination of local and global actions, including habitat conservation, sustainable resource management, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate climate change. Indian case studies on biosphere reserves. India has 18 biosphere reserves, which are designated areas meant for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable development. Some of the Indian case studies on biosphere reserves are Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, located in the Western Ghats. The Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve is a prime example of the conservation of a biodiversity hotspot. The reserve is home to several endangered species such as the Nilgiri tahr, lion-tailed macaque, and the Indian elephant. The reserve has also successfully implemented sustainable development initiatives such as ecotourism, which has helped to generate income for local communities. Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve, located in Tamil Nadu, the Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve is a unique marine ecosystem that supports a wide variety of marine species such as dolphins, dugongs, and sea turtles. The reserve has successfully implemented measures to protect marine habitats and promote sustainable fishing practices among local communities. Sundarbans Biosphere Reserve, located in West Bengal, the Sundarbans Biosphere Reserve is a unique ecosystem consisting of the world's largest delta and the largest mangrove forest in the world. The reserve is home to the endangered Bengal tiger and several other species of flora and fauna. The reserve has implemented measures to reduce human-tiger conflicts, such as the relocation of villages and the use of solar-powered electric fences. Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, located in Uttarakhand, the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve is a high-altitude ecosystem that is home to several endangered species such as the snow leopard and the Himalayan black bear. The reserve has implemented measures to reduce the impact of tourism on the fragile ecosystem, such as limiting the number of tourists and promoting eco-friendly tourism practices. Agastyamalai Biosphere Reserve, located in the Western Ghats, the Agastyamalai Biosphere Reserve is a unique ecosystem that is home to several endemic species of flora and fauna. The reserve has implemented measures to protect the unique ecosystem, such as promoting sustainable agriculture practices and restricting commercial logging. These Indian case studies on biosphere reserves demonstrate the importance of conservation and sustainable development in maintaining biodiversity and ecosystems. Drivers of biodiversity change. Major drivers of biodiversity change in detail essay with multiple examples. Biodiversity change refers to the alteration of the variety and variability of living organisms and their ecological systems. It is caused by various drivers, including natural factors such as climate change, geological events, and ecological interactions, as well as human-induced factors such as habitat destruction, pollution, overexploitation, and introduction of invasive species. In this essay, we will discuss in detail some of the major drivers of biodiversity change with multiple examples. Habitat destruction. Habitat destruction is the primary cause of biodiversity loss worldwide, resulting in the extinction of many species. The destruction of natural habitats is mainly caused by human activities such as deforestation, urbanization, and conversion of natural landscapes to agricultural lands. For example, the Amazon rainforest, the world's largest tropical rainforest, is being destroyed at an alarming rate for cattle ranching, soybean cultivation, and timber harvesting. As a result, the region has lost over 17% of its forest cover since the 1970s, leading to the extinction of many species of plants and animals. Climate change. Climate change is one of the significant drivers of biodiversity change, and it is mainly caused by human activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrialization. The rising global temperatures have severe impacts on the distribution and abundance of many species, causing shifts in their ranges, phenology, and migration patterns. For example, the melting of Arctic sea ice due to global warming has led to the loss of habitat for polar bears, causing a decline in their population. Pollution. Pollution, especially of water bodies, is a significant driver of biodiversity change, leading to the decline of many aquatic species. Pollutants such as heavy metals, pesticides, and fertilizers enter water bodies through agricultural, industrial, and domestic activities, causing eutrophication, oxygen depletion, and toxic contamination. For example, the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010 led to the death of many marine species, including sea turtles, dolphins, and fish. Overexploitation. Overexploitation of natural resources is a significant driver of biodiversity change, especially in the case of fisheries and hunting. Unsustainable fishing practices such as trawling and dynamite fishing have led to the depletion of fish stocks in many regions, causing the collapse of fisheries and threatening the survival of many marine species. Similarly, overhunting has led to the extinction of many species, such as the dodo bird, passenger pigeon, and the Tasmanian tiger. Invasive species. Introduction of invasive species is a major driver of biodiversity change, leading to the displacement of native species and alteration of ecosystems. Invasive species are non-native species that establish and spread in new environments, often outcompeting native species for resources. For example, the zebra mussel, a non-native species introduced to North America, has caused significant ecological and economic damage by clogging water intake pipes, altering food webs, and damaging infrastructure. In conclusion, the drivers of biodiversity change are complex and intertwined, and their impacts on ecosystems are often irreversible. It is, therefore, imperative to implement effective conservation measures to protect biodiversity and ensure its sustainability for future generations. Principles of conservation biology in detail essay with multiple examples and explanations. Conservation biology is a multidisciplinary field that seeks to understand and protect biodiversity at all levels, from genes to ecosystems. It is based on several principles that guide conservation efforts and inform decision-making to ensure the long-term survival of species and their habitats. In this essay, we will discuss in detail the principles of conservation biology with multiple examples and explanations. Evolution is the basis for biodiversity. Evolution is the process by which new species arise from existing ones, and it is the basis for the diversity of life on Earth. Conservation biology recognizes the importance of preserving the evolutionary processes that create and maintain biodiversity. For example, the conservation of genetic diversity in endangered species is critical for their survival and adaptation to changing environmental conditions. The ecological world is dynamic. The natural world is dynamic and constantly changing, and conservation biology recognizes the need to manage ecosystems and species in the context of their natural processes. For example, restoration efforts in degraded habitats should focus on restoring natural processes such as nutrient cycling and ecological succession to maintain the integrity of the ecosystem. Human activities are the primary cause of biodiversity loss. Human activities such as habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, and introduction of invasive species are the primary causes of biodiversity loss worldwide. Conservation biology recognizes the need to address these human-induced threats to biodiversity by reducing or eliminating their impacts on ecosystems and species. For example, the establishment of protected areas such as national parks and wildlife reserves can help to mitigate the impacts of habitat destruction and fragmentation. Conservation biology aims to protect all levels of biodiversity. Conservation biology recognizes the importance of protecting biodiversity at all levels, from genes to ecosystems. It aims to protect not only individual species but also their habitats and the ecological processes that support them. For example, the conservation of migratory birds requires the protection of their breeding, stopover, and wintering habitats, as well as the conservation of the ecosystems they depend on. Conservation biology requires interdisciplinary approaches. Conservation biology is a multidisciplinary field that requires collaboration among scientists, policymakers, and stakeholders to develop effective conservation strategies. It combines knowledge from biology, ecology, genetics, economics, sociology, and other fields to inform conservation decision-making. For example, the use of market-based incentives such as ecotourism and carbon credits can provide economic benefits to local communities and incentivize conservation efforts. Conservation biology must consider ethical and cultural values. Conservation biology recognizes the importance of ethical and cultural values in conservation decision-making. It considers the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities who depend on natural resources for their livelihoods and cultural practices. For example, the conservation of sacred groves and other cultural landscapes is critical for the preservation of cultural heritage and the biodiversity they support. In conclusion, the principles of conservation biology provide a framework for understanding and addressing the complex challenges of biodiversity conservation. They guide conservation efforts to protect biodiversity at all levels and in the face of human-induced threats. It is essential to apply these principles to inform conservation policy and practice to ensure the long-term sustainability of biodiversity and the ecosystems it supports. Principles of conservation in detail essay. Conservation refers to the wise use and management of natural resources to ensure their sustainable use for present and future generations. It is based on several principles that guide the conservation of natural resources, including biodiversity, water, soil, and air. In this essay, we will discuss in detail the principles of conservation and their importance for sustainable resource management. The precautionary principle. The precautionary principle states that in situations where there is uncertainty about the potential environmental impacts of an activity or technology, the burden of proof falls on the proponents of the activity or technology to demonstrate that it will not cause harm to the environment or human health. This principle recognizes that it is often easier and cheaper to prevent environmental damage than to try to repair it after the fact. For example, the precautionary principle has been used to regulate the release of genetically modified organisms into the environment, where the potential risks and impacts are still not fully understood. The polluter pays principle. The polluter pays principle states that those who cause environmental damage or pollution should bear the costs of mitigating or remedying the damage. This principle helps to ensure that the costs of environmental damage are borne by those who cause it, rather than by society as a whole. For example, companies that pollute the air or water should be required to pay for the cleanup and restoration of the affected ecosystems. The ecosystem approach. The ecosystem approach recognizes that ecosystems are complex systems with many interdependent components and processes. It seeks to manage natural resources in a way that maintains the health and resilience of ecosystems, and recognizes that human activities can have both positive and negative impacts on ecosystems. For example, the ecosystem approach can be used to manage forests in a way that maintains their biodiversity and ecological functions while also providing for sustainable timber harvesting. The adaptive management approach. The adaptive management approach recognizes that natural resource management is an iterative process that requires ongoing monitoring and evaluation. It involves setting management goals, implementing management strategies, monitoring the outcomes, and adjusting management strategies as necessary based on the results. This approach recognizes that there is often uncertainty and complexity in natural resource management, and that it is important to be flexible and responsive to changing conditions. For example, adaptive management can be used to manage fisheries in a way that ensures sustainable harvests while also protecting fish populations from overexploitation. The stakeholder involvement principle. The stakeholder involvement principle recognizes that natural resource management often involves multiple stakeholders with different interests and perspectives. It seeks to involve stakeholders in the decision-making process to ensure that their voices are heard and that their concerns are addressed. This principle recognizes that sustainable natural resource management requires collaboration and cooperation among all stakeholders. For example, the stakeholder involvement principle can be used to develop collaborative conservation plans that involve local communities, NGOs, and government agencies in the management of protected areas. In conclusion, the principles of conservation provide a framework for sustainable resource management that recognizes the importance of ecosystem health, stakeholder involvement, and adaptive management. They help to ensure that natural resources are used in a way that is sustainable and equitable, and that the costs and benefits of natural resource use are distributed fairly. It is essential to apply these principles to natural resource management to ensure the long-term sustainability of natural resources and the ecosystems they support. Major approaches to management essay in detail with multiple examples. Management refers to the process of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling resources, including human, financial, and physical resources, to achieve organizational goals. There are several approaches to management that have evolved over time, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. In this essay, we will discuss in detail the major approaches to management and provide multiple examples to illustrate each approach. Scientific management approach. Scientific management is an approach to management that focuses on improving the efficiency and productivity of workers by analyzing their tasks and optimizing their work processes. It was developed by Frederick Taylor in the early 20th century and is still widely used in manufacturing and other industries today. Examples of the scientific management approach include the assembly line process used in automobile manufacturing, where each worker is responsible for a specific task and the products are assembled in a sequential manner. Time motion studies, which analyze the time it takes to complete each task and identify ways to improve efficiency by eliminating unnecessary steps or reducing the time required for each task. Administrative management approach. The administrative management approach focuses on the organization as a whole, rather than on individual workers or tasks. It emphasizes the importance of planning, organizing, coordinating, and controlling organizational resources to achieve goals. Examples of the administrative management approach include the development of organizational charts, which provide a visual representation of the organizational structure and the roles and responsibilities of each position. Use of management principles, such as Henri Fayol's 14 Principles of Management, which provide a framework for managing organizations effectively. Behavioral management approach. The behavioral management approach focuses on understanding the behavior of workers and how it can be influenced to improve their performance. It recognizes that workers are not just cogs in a machine, but individuals with their own needs, motivations, and desires. Examples of the behavioral management approach include the Hawthorne studies, which were conducted by Elton Mayo in the 1920s and 1930s and showed that workers' productivity was influenced by social and psychological factors, such as group dynamics and job satisfaction. The use of motivational theories, such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Herzberg's two-factor theory, which identify the factors that motivate workers and how they can be satisfied. Systems management approach. The systems management approach views organizations as complex systems that are made up of interdependent parts. It emphasizes the importance of understanding the interactions between these parts and how they contribute to the overall functioning of the system. Examples of the systems management approach include the use systems thinking, which involves analyzing the relationships between different parts of an organization and identifying the factors that affect its performance. The use of feedback loops, which allow organizations to monitor their performance and make adjustments as necessary to improve their functioning. Contingency management approach. The contingency management approach recognizes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to management problems. It emphasizes the importance of adapting management practices to fit the specific circumstances of each situation. Examples of the contingency management approach include the use of contingency planning, which involves developing alternative plans to address unexpected events or changes in the environment. The use of situational leadership, which involves adapting leadership styles to fit the needs of different situations and followers. In conclusion, the major approaches to management reflect different perspectives on how organizations should be managed to achieve their goals. Each approach has its own strengths and weaknesses, and the most effective approach will depend on the specific circumstances of the organization and its environment. By understanding these approaches and their applications, managers can choose the most appropriate approach to meet their organizational goals. Biosphere reserves explanation in detail with multiple examples essay. Biosphere reserves are areas of land, water, and/or coastal ecosystems that are designated by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization (UNESCO) to promote the conservation of biodiversity, while also promoting sustainable development and human well-being. In this essay, we will discuss in detail what biosphere reserves are and provide multiple examples of biosphere reserves around the world. Biosphere reserves are designed to serve three interconnected functions. Conservation. Biosphere reserves are intended to protect the diversity of plants and animals, including endangered species, and the ecosystems they inhabit. They also aim to conserve traditional knowledge and cultural practices associated with the natural environment. Development. Biosphere reserves seek to promote sustainable economic development and use of natural resources, while also supporting the livelihoods of local communities. This includes activities such as ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and renewable energy production. Research. Biosphere reserves serve as living laboratories for scientific research, monitoring, and education. They provide a platform for the study of ecosystems, their functioning, and the impacts of human activities on them. There are currently over 700 biosphere reserves in 129 countries around the world. Some examples of biosphere reserves include and in the Biosphere Reserve, Peru. This biosphere reserve is located in the South Central Andes and includes a diverse range of ecosystems, including high-altitude grasslands, wetlands, and cloud forests. It is home to over 800 species of plants and animals, many of which are endemic to the region. The reserve also supports the livelihoods of local communities through sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, and traditional handicrafts. Sundarbans Biosphere Reserve, India and Bangladesh. This biosphere reserve is located in the delta of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers and is the largest mangrove forest in the world. It is home to the endangered Bengal tiger and supports the livelihoods of over 4 million people through fishing, agriculture, and forestry. The reserve is also a major carbon sink, storing large amounts of carbon in its vegetation and soil. Mabler, Parc Naturel Régional de Luberon, France. This biosphere reserve is located in the Provence region of France and includes a range of landscapes, from mountains to forests to agricultural land. It is home to over 1,700 species of plants and animals and supports the livelihoods of local communities through sustainable agriculture and tourism. The reserve also has a strong focus on environmental education and research, with several research stations and educational programs. In conclusion, biosphere reserves are important tools for promoting the conservation of biodiversity, while also promoting sustainable development and human well-being. They serve as living laboratories for scientific research, monitoring, and education, and provide a platform for the study of ecosystems, their functioning, and the impacts of human activities on them. With over 700 biosphere reserves in 129 countries around the world, they are an essential part of global efforts to protect the environment and promote sustainable development. Ecological data analysis. Alpha diversity. Alpha diversity is a measure of the diversity of species within a specific habitat or ecosystem. It is usually calculated by examining the number of species present and their relative abundances within a defined area. Alpha diversity can also take into account other aspects of biodiversity, such as genetic diversity and functional diversity. One of the most common ways to measure alpha diversity is through the use of diversity indices, such as the Shannon Index or the Simpson Index. These indices take into account both the number of species and their relative abundances, and provide a way to compare the diversity of different habitats or ecosystems. Alpha diversity is important because it provides insights into the overall health and functioning of an ecosystem. High levels of alpha diversity are generally associated with more stable ecosystems, while low levels of alpha diversity can be an indication of ecosystem degradation or disturbance. Measuring alpha diversity is therefore an important tool for conservation and management efforts aimed at maintaining or restoring biodiversity. Shannon Diversity Index. The Shannon Diversity Index is a measure of biodiversity that takes into account both the number of species present in a community and the evenness of their distribution. It was developed by the mathematician and information theorist Claude Shannon in the 1940s, and has since become a widely used tool in ecology and conservation biology. The index is based on the concept of information entropy, which is a measure of the uncertainty or randomness of a system. In the case of a biological community, the Shannon Diversity Index is calculated by taking the negative sum of the proportional abundance of each species in the community multiplied by the logarithm of that abundance. H equals sigma pi asterisk log pi. Where H is the Shannon Diversity Index, pi is the proportional abundance of the ith species in the community, and log refers to the natural logarithm. The index ranges from 0 to lane s, where s is the total number of species in the community. A value of 0 indicates that there is only one species present, while a value of lane s indicates that all species are equally abundant. The Shannon Diversity Index is widely used because it is sensitive to both species richness, the number of species present, and evenness, the relative abundance of each species. For example, a community with 10 species where one species is extremely abundant and the others are rare will have a lower Shannon diversity index than a community with 10 species that are all equally abundant. The index is also useful for comparing the diversity of different communities, or for tracking changes in diversity over time. For example, ecologists might use the Shannon diversity index to compare the diversity of plant communities in different habitats, or to monitor changes in the diversity of a coral reef over time. One potential limitation of the Shannon diversity index is that it assumes that all species are equally important in contributing to the overall diversity of a community. However, in reality, some species may be more ecologically important or functionally unique than others. As a result, some researchers have proposed alternative diversity indices that take into account these factors. Overall, the Shannon diversity index remains a powerful tool for quantifying biodiversity and understanding the ecological dynamics of biological communities. Simpson's diversity index. The Simpson's diversity index is a statistical measure used to quantify the biodiversity of a particular ecosystem. It is named after Edward H. Simpson, an English statistician who first introduced the concept in 1949. The index ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating no diversity and 1 indicating complete diversity. The formula for the Simpson's diversity index is as follows. D equals 1 n area summation n squared, where D is the diversity index, n is the number of individuals of a particular species, n is the total number of individuals, and the sum is taken over all species present in the ecosystem. The Simpson's diversity index is an important tool for ecologists because it allows them to compare the biodiversity of different ecosystems and to monitor changes in biodiversity over time. A high diversity index indicates that an ecosystem is healthy and resilient, with many different species occupying different ecological niches. A low diversity index, on the other hand, indicates that an ecosystem is vulnerable to disturbances and may be more prone to collapse. One application of the Simpson's diversity index is in conservation biology, where it is used to assess the effectiveness of conservation efforts. For example, if a conservation program is successful in increasing the number of individuals of a particular endangered species, the Simpson's diversity index for that ecosystem will increase, indicating a healthier and more resilient ecosystem. Another application of the Simpson's diversity index is in agriculture, where it is used to evaluate the impact of different farming practices on biodiversity. For example, if a particular farming practice leads to a decrease in the number of different species present in an ecosystem, the Simpson's diversity index will decrease, indicating that the farming practice is not sustainable in the long term. In conclusion, the Simpson's diversity index is a powerful tool for ecologists, conservationists, and farmers alike. By quantifying the biodiversity of different ecosystems, it allows us to better understand and monitor the health of our planet's ecosystems, and to make more informed decisions about how to manage and conserve them for future generations. Peelew's evenness and calculation. Peelew's evenness index, also known as the Peelew's J or the Shannon's evenness index, is a measure of how evenly the individuals of different species are distributed within a community or ecosystem. This index takes into account both species richness, the number of different species present, and species abundance, the number of individuals of each species present. The Peelew's evenness index ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating complete unevenness, only one species present, and 1 indicating complete evenness, all species present in equal numbers. To calculate the Peelew's evenness index, you first need to determine the species richness S and species abundance N of the community or ecosystem you are studying. Then, calculate the Shannon's diversity index H using the following formula: H equals sigma pi asterisk ln pi, where pi is the proportion of individuals of species I relative to the total number of individuals in the community, and ln represents the natural logarithm. Finally, calculate the Peelew's evenness index J using the following formula: J equals H ln S. Formula normalizes the Shannon's diversity index by dividing it by the maximum possible diversity, ln S, which occurs when all species are equally abundant. For example, let's say you are studying a community with 5 species in the following abundances. Species 1 20 individuals. Species 2 30 individuals. Species 3 40 individuals. Species 4 5 individuals. Species 5 5 individuals. First, calculate the total number of individuals N in the community. N equals 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus 5 plus 5 equals 100. Then, calculate the Shannon's diversity index H. Pi equals number of individuals of species I, and pi for each species would be species 1, 0.2 species 2, 0.3 species 3, 0.4 species 4, 0.05 species 5, 0.05. H equals sigma pi asterisk ln pi equals 0.2 asterisk ln 0.2 plus 0.3 asterisk ln 0.3 plus 0.4 asterisk ln 0.4 plus 0.05 asterisk ln 0.05 plus 0.05 asterisk ln 0.05 equals 1.293. Finally, calculate the Peelew's evenness index J. J equals H ln S equals 1.293, ln 5 equals 0.828. Therefore, the Peelew's evenness index for this community is 0.828, indicating a relatively even distribution of species. Margalef species richness and calculation. Margalef species richness is a measure of biodiversity that assesses the number of different species present in a given ecosystem. Ecological data analysis. Alpha diversity. Alpha diversity is a measure of the diversity of species within a specific habitat or ecosystem. It is usually calculated by examining the number of species present and their relative abundances within a defined area. Alpha diversity can also take into account other aspects of biodiversity, such as genetic diversity and functional diversity. One of the most common ways to measure alpha diversity is through the use of diversity indices, such as the Shannon index or the Simpson index. These take into account both the number of species and their relative abundances, and provide a way to compare the diversity of different habitats or ecosystems. Alpha diversity is important because it provides insights into the overall health and functioning of an ecosystem. Levels of alpha diversity are generally associated with more stable ecosystems, while low levels of alpha diversity can be an indication of ecosystem degradation or disturbance. Measuring alpha diversity is therefore an important tool for conservation and management efforts aimed at maintaining or restoring biodiversity. Shannon Diversity Index. The Shannon Diversity Index is a measure of biodiversity that takes into account both the number of species present in a community and the evenness of their distribution. It was developed by the mathematician and information theorist Claude Shannon in the 1940s, and has since become a widely used tool in ecology and conservation biology. The index is based on the concept of information entropy, which is a measure of the uncertainty or randomness of a system. In the case of a biological community, the Shannon Diversity Index is calculated by taking the negative sum of the proportional abundance of each species in the community multiplied by the logarithm of that abundance. H equals sigma pi asterisk log pi. The Shannon Diversity Index, pi is the proportional abundance of the ith species in the community, and log refers to the natural logarithm. The index ranges from 0 to ln s, where s is the total number of species in the community. A value 0 indicates that there is only one species present, while a value of ln s indicates that all species are equally abundant. The Shannon Diversity Index is widely used because it is sensitive to both species richness, the number of species present, and evenness, the relative abundance of each species. For example, a community with 10 species where one species is extremely abundant and the others are rare will have a lower Shannon Diversity Index than a community with 10 species that are all equally abundant. The index is also useful for comparing the diversity of different communities, or for tracking changes in diversity over time. For example, ecologists might use the Shannon Diversity Index to compare the diversity of plant communities in different habitats, or to monitor changes in the diversity of a coral reef over time. One potential limitation of the Shannon Diversity Index is that it assumes that all species are equally important in contributing to the overall diversity of a community. However, in reality, some species may be more ecologically important or functionally unique than others. As a result, some researchers have proposed alternative diversity indices that take into account these factors. Overall, the Shannon Diversity Index remains a powerful tool for quantifying biodiversity and understanding the ecological dynamics of biological communities. Simpson's Diversity Index. The Simpson's Diversity Index is a statistical measure used to quantify the biodiversity of a particular ecosystem. It is named after Edward H. Simpson, an English statistician who first introduced the concept in 1949. The index ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating no diversity and 1 indicating complete diversity. The formula for the Simpson's Diversity Index is as follows. D equals 1 n area summation n squared. Where is the diversity index? N is the number of individuals of a particular species, n is the total number of individuals, and the sum is taken over all species present in the ecosystem. The Simpson's Diversity Index is an important tool for ecologists because it allows them to compare the biodiversity of different ecosystems and to monitor changes in biodiversity over time. A high diversity index indicates that an ecosystem is healthy and resilient, with many different species occupying different ecological niches. A low diversity index, on the other hand, indicates that an ecosystem is vulnerable to disturbances and may be more prone to collapse. One application of the Simpson's Diversity Index is in conservation biology, where it is used to assess the effectiveness of conservation efforts. The conservation program is successful in increasing the number of individuals of a particular endangered species. The Simpson's Diversity Index for that ecosystem will increase, indicating a healthier and more resilient ecosystem. Another application of the Simpson's Diversity Index is in agriculture, where it is used to evaluate the impact of different farming practices on biodiversity. For example, if a particular farming practice leads to a decrease in the number of different species present in an ecosystem, the Simpson's Diversity Index will decrease, indicating that the farming practice is not sustainable in the long term. In conclusion, the Simpson's Diversity Index is a powerful tool for ecologists, conservationists, and farmers alike. By quantifying the diversity of different ecosystems, it allows us to better understand and monitor the health of our planet's ecosystems, and to make more informed decisions about how to manage and conserve them for future generations. Peelew's Evenness and Calculation. Peelew's Evenness Index, also known as the Peelew's J or the Shannon's Evenness Index, is a measure of how evenly the individuals of different species are distributed within a community or ecosystem. It takes into account both species richness, the number of different species present, and species abundance, the number of individuals of each species present. Peelew's Evenness Index ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating complete unevenness, only one species present, and 1 indicating complete evenness, all species present in equal numbers. To calculate the Peelew's Evenness Index, you first need to determine the species richness S and species abundance N of the community or ecosystem you are studying. Then, calculate the Shannon's Diversity Index H using the following formula, H equals sigma pi asterisk ln pi, where pi is the proportion of individuals of species I relative to the total number of individuals in the community, and ln represents the natural logarithm. Finally, calculate the Peelew's Evenness Index J using the following formula, J equals H ln S. So normalizes the Shannon's Diversity Index by dividing it by the maximum possible diversity, ln S, which occurs when all species are equally abundant. For example, let's say you are studying a community with 5 species in the following abundances. Species 1 20 individuals. Species 2 30 individuals. Species 3 40 individuals. Species 4 5 individuals. Species 5 5 individuals. First, calculate the total number of individuals N in the community. N equals 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus 5 equals 100. Then, calculate the Shannon's Diversity Index H. Pi equals number of individuals of species I, and pi for each species would be species 1, 0.2 species 2, 0.3 species 3, 0.4 species 4, 0.05 species 5, 0.05. H equals sigma asterisk ln pi equals 0.2 asterisk ln 0.2 plus 0.3 asterisk ln 0.3 plus 0.4 asterisk ln 0.4 plus 0.05 asterisk ln 0.05 plus 0.05 asterisk ln 0.05 equals 1.293. Finally, calculate the Peelew's Evenness Index J. Equals H ln S equals 1.293, ln 5 equals 0.828. Therefore, the Peelew's Evenness Index for this community is 0.828, indicating a relatively even distribution of species. Margalef species richness and calculation. Margalef species richness is a measure of biodiversity that assesses the number of different species present in a given ecosystem, taking into account the total number of individuals and the relative abundance of each species. This metric was developed by the Spanish ecologist Ramón Margalef in 1958 and has since become a widely used measure in ecology. To calculate Mardlev species richness, you need to know the total number of species S in the ecosystem and the total number of individuals N present. The equation for Mardlev species richness is as follows. D equals S1 lane N, where D is the Mardlev diversity index, S is the total number of species, and lane N is the natural logarithm of the total number of individuals. The value of D ranges from 0 to infinity, with higher values indicating greater species richness. However, the Mardlev diversity index does not take into account the evenness of the species distribution. It is often used in conjunction with other diversity indices, such as the Shannon diversity index or Simpson's diversity index, to obtain a more complete picture of the biodiversity of an ecosystem. In summary, Mardlev species richness is a useful measure of biodiversity that takes into account both the number of species and the number of individuals present in an ecosystem. By calculating this metric, ecologists can gain insights into the diversity and health of an ecosystem, and use this information to inform conservation and management efforts. Fisher's alpha and beta diversity. In ecology, alpha diversity and beta diversity are two commonly used measures of biodiversity. Alpha diversity refers to the diversity within a particular habitat or community, and it is typically measured using indices such as species richness, the number of species present, or the Shannon-Weiner index, which takes into account both the number of species and their relative abundance. Alpha diversity is useful for comparing the diversity of different habitats or communities within a particular area. Beta diversity, on the other hand, refers to the turnover or change in species composition between different habitats or communities. It is typically using indices such as the Jaccard index, which compares the similarity of species between two communities based on presence-absence data, or the Brake-Curtis dissimilarity index, which takes into account both the presence, absence, and relative abundance of species. Beta diversity is useful for understanding how different environmental factors affect the distribution of species across different habitats or communities. Fisher's alpha is a measure of alpha diversity that takes into account both species richness and evenness, the relative abundance of different species. It is calculated using the formula alpha equals lane S1b, where S is the number of species and B is the Berger-Parker index, which measures the dominance of the most abundant species. Fisher's alpha is useful for comparing the diversity of different habitats or communities with varying levels of species evenness. Overall, alpha and beta diversity, along with measures such as Fisher's alpha, are important tools for understanding and managing biodiversity in ecological systems. Morizada-Horn index in ecology. The Morizada-Horn index is a measure used in ecology to quantify the similarity between two different samples or populations of species. It is named after the ecologists Dr. Morizada and Dr. Horn, who developed the index in the 1970s. The index takes into account both the species richness, number of different species, and the abundance number of individuals of the species in each sample. It is calculated as follows. C equals 2 asterisk sum AB sum A squared plus sum B squared. When B are vectors representing the abundance of each species in the two samples, and AB is a vector representing the overlap in species abundance between the two samples. The numerator of the equation sums the product of each element in AB, while the denominator sums the squares of the elements in A and B. The resulting value of C ranges from 0 to 1, with higher values indicating greater similarity between the samples. A value of 1 indicates complete overlap in species abundance between the two samples, while a value of 0 indicates no overlap. The Morizada-Horn index is often used in community ecology to compare the structure of different ecological communities, and can be used to evaluate the effectiveness of conservation efforts. However, it is important to note that the index has limitations, such as sensitivity to differences in rare species and dependence on sample size. 4. It is often used in combination with other indices and methods for a more comprehensive understanding of ecological similarity. Sorensen index in ecology and how to calculate. The Sorensen index is a similarity index commonly used in ecology to measure the similarity between two different ecological communities. It is based on the proportion of species shared between the two communities and ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating no similarity and 1 indicating complete similarity. To calculate the Sorensen index, you first need to make a list of the species found in each of the two communities being compared. Let's say that community A has 20 species and community B has 25 species, and that there are 10 species that are shared between them. To calculate the Sorensen index, you use the formula, Sorensen index equals 2C A plus B, where species shared by both communities, in our example, C equals 10, A equals the total number of species in community A, in our example, A equals 20, B equals the total number of species in community B, in our example, B equals 25. Plugging in the numbers from our example, we get Sorensen index equals 2, 10, 20 plus 25 equals 0.40. Therefore, the Sorensen index for the two communities is 0.40, indicating moderate similarity. Brake-Curtis similarity index. The Brake-Curtis similarity index is a popular method used in ecological research to measure the similarity or dissimilarity between different samples or communities. This is particularly useful in analyzing the differences in species composition or abundance between different environments, such as comparing the vegetation or animal communities in two different habitats. The Brake-Curtis similarity index is calculated by comparing the number of shared species or the relative abundances of species between two communities. This index ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 indicating no similarity between the two communities, and 1 indicating identical communities. Formula for calculating Brake-Curtis similarity is S_BC equals 1, 2 asterisk J and 1 plus N2. S_BC is the Brake-Curtis similarity index, J is the sum of the smaller counts of the species found in both samples, and N1 and N2 are the total counts of species in each sample. One of the primary applications of the Brake-Curtis similarity index is in comparing the diversity and composition of different communities. For example, ecologists might use the index to compare the diversity and composition of plant communities in two different habitats, or to analyze changes in the diversity and composition of microbial communities over time. Index is also useful in identifying areas of high conservation value, as it can help to identify areas that are particularly important for maintaining high levels of biodiversity. By identifying areas of high similarity or dissimilarity, conservationists can better target their efforts to protect or restore ecosystems. In addition, the Brake-Curtis similarity index can also be used in other fields, such as in the analysis of genetic data and market research. For example, it could be used to analyze the similarities or differences in consumer preferences between different regions. Overall, the Brake-Curtis similarity index is an important tool for ecologists and other researchers studying diversity and composition in different communities. Its ability to measure similarity or dissimilarity between different samples makes it a valuable tool in identifying patterns and trends in ecological data. Concept of habitat and niche. The habitat of an organism is the place where it lives, or the place where one would go to find it. The ecological niche is the position or status of an organism within its community and ecosystem resulting from the organism's structural adaptations, physiological responses and specific behavior, inherited and/or learned. The ecological niche of an organism depends not only on where it lives but also on what it does.